Hi, this is Julie with a quick invitation for you before we begin. As you listen, you'll hear my guest today, Amy Simpkins, talk about her Mom Manifesto and about her role as an ambassador in the Mother's Quest Facebook group. If you're curious to learn more about the power of creating a manifesto for yourself and want to tune in to Amy's inspiring live video posts as ambassador, all the content is waiting for you in the free group. Just visit www.mothersquest.com/community to request to join. Now, on to the show. Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast with someone I deeply admire and whose recent book, Spiral, A Catalyst for Innovation and Expansion, was a revelation to me. Speaker, author, thought leader, homeschooling mother, and CEO of the renewable energy startup, MuGrid Analytics, Amy Simpkins. Before a self-described identity crisis brought her to the work she's doing today, Amy was quite literally on the path to becoming an astronaut. After pursuing a degree in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT and a master's in astronautical engineering from USC, she began a 10-year tenure as an aspiring spacecraft systems architect, designing, integrating, and operating spacecraft at Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company. How she determined she no longer wanted to be an astronaut, and the power of truly being seen by someone else, which led to her becoming a coach, are just a few of the topics we explored during our conversation. I first came to know Amy when I was facilitating a virtual power circle for the organization Emerging Women, and Amy was a participant. Right away, I knew she was someone special, as she brought the insight of an engineer's brain, a poet's heart, and an alchemist's life journey to every session. A kindred spirit of Amy's in the circle, who also possesses this unique combination of intellect and heart, was Olivia Parr-Rud, a data scientist and researcher turned speaker and author with a powerful message of her own. I'm honored to introduce Olivia with this episode's dedication.
I am so honored to dedicate this episode with Amy Simpkins to my own mother. Widowed at a young age, my mother went on to become a successful entrepreneur and businesswoman. And watching her navigate her difficult life gave me the sense that I could do anything I wanted. Sadly, she pushed herself so hard that she died of cancer at the young age of 49. When I was 49, I was also diagnosed with cancer. And I realized I was following in my mother's footsteps a little too perfectly. Boy, was this a wake-up call for me. I was working a stressful corporate job and at the same time taking care of 3 kids and a husband with serious health issues. And it hit me. I was taking care of everybody else. I didn't even think to take care of myself. I knew I had to make a change, but I felt stuck in the corporate world just to survive. After some deep soul searching, I made a commitment to take better care of myself. This took me into some deep healing around my own abandonment issues and how to learn to deeply love myself. As a data scientist and a researcher, I was also curious about corporate cultures and why some were so much better than others. This led to an amazing discovery. It turns out that companies with a culture of caring and compassion actually make more money. I share this research and my own healing journey in my recent book, Love at Work. That's why it's such a thrill for me to dedicate this episode to Amy Simpkins. She's a brilliant scientist who is managing to beautifully balance her priorities so that everyone thrives. Her family, her employees, her customers, really everyone she touches. And I feel she does this so beautifully by taking good care of herself. She's an amazing role model for me. I love you, Amy Simpkins.
Thank you, Olivia, for this powerful dedication to your mother, for revealing so much about your own discoveries, and for the beautiful reflection of what you love about Amy. It is true, Amy is an incredible role model and lights the way for so many of us with how she explains and embodies the iterative spiral path to life, motherhood, and entrepreneurship. And in this conversation, as we explored her wisdom and lessons learned along the epic guideposts, it felt like we revealed together the creative genius, a quality she most admired in her mother that is also inside of her. I left feeling more at ease than when I arrived, noticing the places and ways that I can bring more integration and awareness about the spiral processes in my life, and committed to making space, as Amy challenged me to do, to put down my phone and sit in the pause and exploration of a question in my life, rather than rushing to a solution. I invite you to do the same right now, to push pause, really listen to this conversation, and create space for integration, curiosity, iteration, and creativity in your epic life. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Amy, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. I have been wanting to have this conversation with you for a while, and I'm so excited it's here.
Thank you, Julie. This is going to be so much fun. I love doing podcast interviews when you're talking to a friend. Like, there's something magic about that.
Yes, I was saying as we were setting intentions for our conversation, I'm just ready to welcome in the ease and the flow of it. And it's also where I am. It's the afternoon. I've had a full day. I just feel myself like kind of relaxing. And I was actually lying on my bed with your book, Spiral, which I love, flipping through and finding some of my favorite passages. There's a different kind of, a different energy for me right now about this conversation that we're moving into. Very cool. I also have to say, we're in the midst of the Mother's Quest Manifesto Challenge right now, and you are our June ambassador in the group. And it has been such a delight to have you as our ambassador. You've been doing these really thoughtful, insightful, but so real and funny Facebook Lives in the group with some crashing of kids here and there. And you've been traveling the world as you're doing them. So you're in a different location every time. And I've just so been appreciating your presence.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. You know, when you asked me to be the ambassador, I was like, I don't know about that. Like, I've got all this travel and then and then the family complexity that comes along with that. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, that's part of it. Like, part of it is showing the real journey. Like, part of being an ambassador or a leader or a mentor is like showing the real journey and being supportive of a real journey, like whatever that looks like. I used to think that you had to keep work separate from family, separate from, all of these like stovepipes in your life. And I don't think reality is really like that. So, yep.
Yeah, you're already alluding to a part in your book that I definitely wanted to get to today around integration. More of that to come. But let's start with the question I ask every guest. Tell me a little bit about your own childhood and the impact that your mother has had in shaping who you are today.
Yeah, for sure. My mother is a creative genius, but that's not really what I want to talk about, actually. It's funny because she was a creative genius and I'm more of like a left brain, logical, I became an engineer person. And so it's funny because there was a certain level of we didn't understand each other. I think in a lot of ways we helped each other because she definitely did help me see the artistry in life. And I think I helped her see that, science isn't scary as much. But what she really did for me was that she never took no for an answer. She always had some creative solution and did it with joy. She was always like, well, let's go find out. When we were kids, we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't know that at the time. That was the kind of childhood I had, that I didn't really know. It's only in hindsight. But, she struggled with how to parent 3 kids over the summer, home from school, and what are we going to do? Looking for free activities. And so we had this thing where we would go to a different playground every other day. If it was within an hour's drive, it was fair game. And then we had this complex rating system. The most fun, the most complicated, this one had a castle and we could pretend that one was a ship. That one had 2 wobbly bridges and that was the best. And so it was this joy-filled approach to having fun. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter that it wasn't expensive. It didn't matter that it wasn't a brand name attraction. We had a blast. And I think that makes even more of an impact on me now as a parent, looking back about how fun that was and what a great idea that was from the parenting perspective. Just kind of blows me away. And then, things when we wanted to explore career options or thinking about what we might want to major in college, she was always all right, let's figure it out. Let's research it. Let's go to the library and get some books out. Who do I know that you could talk to about who does that profession? So my brother, who was looking at going to the Air Force Academy and maybe being a pilot, they went out to the Air National Guard base and got a tour. It was pretty cool, the level of support of not just, oh, you can be anything you want in life, but also let's go do some research. Let's go figure out what it actually means for you. Who do I know that you could talk to and, interview? It was so active and it was such a great approach, a totally deeper level of support to not just say, yeah, I believe in you that you can do that, than to throw the support behind it of no, really, this is really what it looks like in the real world to do those jobs.
I love it. I feel inspired as a mother just hearing you talk about it. I'm going to do that this summer. We're going to be exploring the parks and evaluating them. I see some of those qualities too in myself around connecting my kids to the resources and things they're interested in. I'm so curious, how do you feel like that then led to the path that you've chosen to live in your life?
Well, I do think it laid the foundation of me being willing to experiment, willing to try different things. I am a person who's always curious. It did lay the foundation for that curiosity that is kind of this undercurrent of who I am, that not just to have a good idea. Oh, that would be interesting. That's interesting to think about. But then say, hey, let's look it up. Let's do some research. Let's figure out what it would take. Let's see who I know in my network who can connect me. All of those questions, I understand how to ask those questions because of the groundwork that she laid.
Amazing. So I want to start to move from this and understanding of what shaped you when you were young to the life that you're living now. You know that I talk about, my manifesto, just as yours is to stay curious, mine is about living an epic life. And epic has 2 connotations. The first is this idea of your life being the story, the epic journey, filled with all the things that are, really juicy and really matter to you, filled with the kinds of memories that you'll want to share someday, maybe with your grandchildren, and answering the call, following those whispers inside. And then it's also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that kind of life when we're raising our children. What do you feel like has been your journey? And what are you most on a quest for these days?
It's a really interesting question. And partially because I feel like I spent most of my life questing for something. And actually, to put the bottom line up front, I feel like I've arrived at a place of pause right now where I have the things that I asked for. And now I'm doing the work in this place, in this static place, instead of wishing I had something else or striving for something else. And that's really strange for me. It feels a little unsteady because I feel like there's something I probably should be going for, more, higher, faster, better. But really where I'm at right now is like saying, okay, like here is where I am in the present. And like, I have worked so hard to get here. And now like, what am I to do right here, right now where I'm at? And that's different. And so I'll back up and tell a little bit of the story that like, for most of my life, I was building my life around my career quest. I wanted to be an astronaut, and from the time I was 12, and it wasn't the childhood like, oh, I want to be an astronaut today and tomorrow a firefighter. Like, stayed with me. I wanted to be an astronaut all the way through my 20s, and I majored in aerospace engineering at MIT, and I have a master's degree. I designed and built and operated spacecraft for the first 10 years of my career. And it was a very like linear sort of path. Like you could see it all laid out in front of me that like what I was supposed to do next. Like I was always reaching for the next step because what I really wanted was to be an astronaut. And that wasn't going to happen until I filled out the application and was accepted. And I hate to use the word regret because I really believe that everything in my journey brought me to where I am today. But my biggest regret from that time in my life is that I don't think I really did stop to really see the present moment or enjoy the present moment or say like this present moment is enough for me to be happy right now because I had these goals that I was always in motion toward. And so, goals are a great thing and they keep you in motion, but anything like they can be taken to this toxic extreme. I decided, I was a spacecraft designer and I worked with astronauts and I saw their day-to-day lives. And I was like, I think for my career, I really want to be doing a different kind of work than the work that they do. And so that was the beginning of making a different choice. So the phase of my quest that came after that linear journey was like a complete identity crisis. If I'm not an engineer, who am I? If I'm not going to apply to the astronaut program, if that's not my major goal in life, then what am I going to do? Like, what am I supposed to do with my time on Earth? Like those were the questions. And that was about 6 years ago that started. I would say that most of the past 6 years have been about that identity crisis, about that finding myself, who I really am outside of this identity of engineer, proto-astronaut person. It's funny because I had kids in there too, but like the mother part of it was like a second order effect. Like it was all about this like career goal. So who am I without that? And again, from the time I was 12, I had built my entire identity around it. It was like ripping my heart out and then trying to figure out how the pieces fit back together.
I'm curious right now, Amy. I talk a lot about what my own spark moment was. For me, it was losing myself in many ways and sidelining some of my dreams in motherhood. I really appreciate that for you. The motherhood was, what did you call it? A secondary?
In math, we would say it's a second order effect.
A second order effect. So I had this spark moment, which was this interesting visit from two birds that I ended up making all of this meaning about. I'm curious what for you was a spark moment that led you to shift and move into reorganizing your identity.
So it happened before I left my corporate job and I left corporate engineering. So I was looking at the career options for what I could do next. Should I like get a promotion? Like, should I try and get into management? Like, do I need some more experience to go for the job that I want? Like, what am I doing here? Like, what is the path that I am on? I was looking around and I was like, I don't really want to do any of this. I don't want your job and I don't want that job over there. And I don't, it doesn't look exciting. It doesn't look fun and fulfilling. And it doesn't look like it's worth my time away from my kids. And so I was having this consternation about what exactly I wanted to do next in terms of my career path in corporate engineering. And I kind of got a little bit bit by the entrepreneurship bug of saying like, oh, wow, like there are people out there who can take their expertise and like market it and people will pay to have them like bring their knowledge and bring their skills. And this is incredible. I never thought of myself as entrepreneurial before because I came out of tech and, I'm in a technical profession and in technology, entrepreneurship so often looks like raising millions of dollars of venture capital and like having to pitch all the time. And I was like, that is not me at all. This other kind of entrepreneurship where, you're marketing your own expertise was really refreshing, that like I could have an impact immediately. Someone could take what I say and like implement something right now and be better, feel better, do better. Like, this is incredible. So I was already kind of feeling that. I had kicked around like, okay, like what would it look like for me to start my own engineering consultancy? Could I do contract work in engineering? And I still hadn't broken out of that a little bit. And a friend of mine who was trying to recruit me into her multi-level marketing program, I was in her group and she was, wow, you're really encouraging to people. And I really noticed how you're always super positive and you have great advice to give. She's like, have you ever considered becoming a coach? And it was like the heavens parted and the angels sang. My entire life flashed before my eyes because there were these moments throughout my life that people had said something similar to me. When I was in high school, there were teachers who said, you're going to be an educator, right? Like you could sit on the board of education. You have such great ideas. And I was like, are you kidding? I don't like people. I like math. I don't want to be in a profession that requires personal interaction with people. But I guess I went back to all of those moments where people were telling me, you have this way with people. People will listen to you. You have this gift. And I hadn't been able to hear that before. And here, all of a sudden in that moment, it felt like she sort of called me out and was like, hey, it's time. Like, it's time to step into that role of being with people and being a real mentor for people. That was really the moment where I started to shift. And what happened sort of after that was I went all the way to the other side. I was basically like, well, I'm going to be a life coach and I'm never going to do engineering again. It went all the way to the slam to the other extreme. And where I've gotten to now through this roiling hurricane of identity crisis, I've sort of come out the other side now. I find that I'm much more of both. I am a person who thinks logically and analytically and strategically, and I'm also a person who's extremely empathic, knows how to hold emotional space for people, and sees the value of treating every client holistically, not just as an intellect, but also as a spiritual being and an emotional being, and how powerful it can be to interact with people on all levels, not just with their brain. But the start of it was that moment. And I never did join her MLM, but she changed my life with that statement of, it's amazing to me how seeing someone else's gifts and like speaking someone else's gifts is so powerful, because she could have assumed that I knew that about myself. And I really, really didn't at that time.
The same thing was coming to me as you were sharing that story. It's funny, just the other night, I went to an event for a fellow podcaster who I met online, but it turns out lives 7 minutes from my house. Her name is Lisa. And at the very end, we could come up and share something, anything that was coming to us. And what came to me was this principle that I learned in the youth organization that I worked at for almost 15 years. This idea that community is built by being known and knowing others. And there's something about allowing yourself to be truly known and to have what people see reflected back to you that is just so powerful and can be really transformational and can change your life.
That was a big thing when I started working as a coach and coaching people. I took a coach training course, and one of the exercises we did was just a reflective exercise that we got together with a partner, and the partner, got to talk for 10 minutes, and then the other person would say, here's what I heard you say. Like, not comment, not offer advice or offer anything beyond that, but just simply reflect back what I heard you say. And being on the receiving end of that, to have someone else say to me, here's what I heard you say. I mean, it brought me to tears. Like, just to really be heard, to have someone really pay attention. It was incredible. So yeah, it's super powerful. Just the simple act of being seen, being heard.
I want to use this idea of really seeing people to delve into the first guidepost, which is E, stands for engaged mindfully with our children. What are the ways that you really see your kids? And I know that you are a homeschooling mom. How do you find ways to engage meaningfully with them through your curriculum?
When we do homeschool, we are pretty eclectic, I think is the technical homeschool term for what we do. We use a curriculum for structure to make sure I cover the material that needs to be covered for grade level. But by and large, as long as we get all the math concepts in there, I allow them, we're kind of unschooly in a way. We follow their interests. We take their interests deeper. And so that in itself requires a certain amount of mindfulness. We strike a balance, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm like, look, you have to learn to carry the one this week. That just has to get done, which is not maybe a less mindful of approach and more of that brute force approach. But then to be flexible and say, well, hey, we were going to discuss clouds in science, but you found a dead snake and now we're going to do a dissection. We did that the other day. It was fresh.
I saw that photo on Facebook.
We accidentally ran over a snake in the driveway. I'm so sorry, snake. But we decided to do a dissection. And I was like, let me get the scissors. And my husband was like, you're joking. I'm like, you only think I'm joking. And it turned into this really beautiful thing. I try to approach it holistically. Maybe this is mindful too. It's funny. You asked me this question and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I'm mindful. But here you go. There's lots of ways. I feel strongly that we make it a policy around here that we don't hurt animals who aren't causing a problem. There's some cases you got to take down the wasp nest, for safety. But we don't hurt animals that aren't causing a problem. And so to see an animal get hurt like that, my heart really hurt. So we had a little ceremony for the snake and we thanked the snake for being part of our science learning and that we were going to do our best to get knowledge from the snake. And so, that was part of it. Not just saying, well, that's okay. Who cares? But to make it meaningful for them that, yeah, it does bother me when living creatures die, but it's part of the cycle of life and we have to deal with it, but we can also be respectful of it and mindful of it at the same time. To then explore the snake and see the organs and see lights turn on for them about how the snake's body works and how their own body works, and there's similarities and there's differences. It was a totally unplanned exercise. It was really powerful, I think, scientifically. And then I always look at those kinds of things and say, I hope that this fuels their curiosity because they can look for opportunities in places that they didn't see coming.
Tell me about this idea of seeing your children. I have curiosity about how that shows up for you.
Seeing them?
Yeah, when we were just reflecting about the power in coaching of really being seen for who you are and really being deeply listened to, how does that show up in your relationship with your children?
I really want to empower them to be decision makers for themselves whenever possible. And then when they can't be decision makers, to expose my own decision-making process so they feel a part of it. We do a lot of crazy things as a family in our family. We travel all over the world together. We do alternative schooling in several different types of ways. Homeschool is one of them. They see my husband and I that we're entrepreneurs, and my husband and I are also business partners. We run a renewable energy consulting firm together. There's friction there, and my kids get a front row seat to see the friction that happens around running a business, not just being a family. I recognize that we're a team. One of our family mottos is teamwork makes the dream work. And that treating them equal members of the team and empowering them to make their own decisions whenever possible is really important to me. And so a lot of times, because they're so young, so right now they're 8, 7, and 3.5. Since they're so young, a lot of times empowering them to make their own decisions means holding space for them to make those decisions and walking them through the decision-making process, but without enforcing my own opinion necessarily, which I have found to be extremely emotionally tiring. But when it happens, it's so magical and it's so important. And I feel so good about laying that kind of groundwork for them for their future. Obviously it doesn't always work that way. There are definitely moments where I'm like, this is the way it is. But ideally speaking, that's how I try to do that. I try to see them. I try to see what is important to them and empower them to make decisions or be part of my own decision-making process, with their own opinions.
So powerful. Let's move to the next guidepost, which is P, and it stands for passionate and purposeful. And this is about the impact that we make in the world beyond our family. What would you say is the biggest impact that you're having in the world right now?
Oh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
For so many years of having this like goal that really well defined of wanting to advance human knowledge through the exploration of space. Like that was my thing. And it was so like, it was this very small box. And now I do a lot, and I do a lot in a lot of different domains. And I just want to see the world be a better and better place for people. I really loved the book Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. She's an economics professor out of Oxford University. It's an amazing little book. It's about living inside the donut. So if you imagine two concentric circles, the inner circle is where humans need to be in order to be thriving. So they need to like have obviously food, water, shelter. And then they also have to have like equity, and they have to have access to energy, and they have to have a community and all those things that make humans healthy and thriving. That's in the middle. And then on the outside of the outer circle is the planet. The planet needs to have like ocean deacidification, and it needs to have a healthy atmosphere, and it needs to have, less carbon dioxide, and all of this stuff makes the planet healthy on the outside. And so her proposition is that the donut in between those two is where there's this happy, safe, and just space for humans to live in harmony with Earth. I feel like that's where I'm at right now is like, how can I be part of making that happen? Like I work in renewable energy, which is, supporting the planetary part of that. And it's also supporting like energy equity efforts. That's part of my work. I also I'm doing speaking, and I want to inspire people to have their own ideas and bring their own ideas to fruition. I think ultimately, for the first time in my life, this is part of what we said at the beginning when you asked, like, what am I questing for right now? Part of the answer to that is I don't really know. And part of the answer to this is I don't really know either. Like, what will my legacy be? I don't have a good picture of that. How am I trying to impact the world? I don't know. I'm doing the work that's in front of me. But I do feel I was in National Honor Society for a while as a high school student, and our advisor, she loved the term noblesse oblige, which is basically like to whom much is given, much is required.
Would you say that that's kind of similar to the Spider-Man thing? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. And I feel the weight of that because, I do have a lot of privilege. I do have a lot of power, and I have a lot of education, and I've had a lot of experiences. My family has the opportunity to travel the world. What are we going to do with that? Like that always hangs in the back of my mind. Yeah, we get to see a lot of cool things and check a lot of neat boxes. And sure, that's part of it. Like it makes me happy. But the other part is like, I want to raise kids who are more globally aware. I want to bring back stories of the countries I visit and help other people understand other parts of the world. I feel this burden to bring people with me, people who don't have the opportunity to start their own business. Maybe it's my opportunity to hire them or hire them to do their own jobs, and I see like the economic flow go through that. So I feel that burden of responsibility that, okay, I've created this life that I like, this life that I'm working hard at. And how can I pay that forward? How can I share this love? How can I leave the world a better place in the best way, to the best of my own ability from where I'm at right now? Those are all the questions I ask, but I don't really have good answers for any of them.
I like to ask people sometimes to think about an epic snapshot moment. Sometimes this illuminates a lot for us about where we are having the most impact. If you think about something that happened recently where you felt like it's one of those moments where time kind of slows down and you feel like it's filled with like all the things that most light you up and that really matter to you, and you almost wish you could bottle it all up. What's a recent moment connected to your impact that felt like that for you?
I do feel like it's related to work. And my husband and I, we're pretty location independent. We have a small team, but we're mostly kind of all remote, which is kind of how we architected the business. We can travel, they can travel. We hire people who like to travel. So my husband and I were working on a renewable energy project in our living room after the kids go to bed. And, we're looking at the results. We do analysis, like contracted analysis. That's pretty much what we do. And we're looking at analysis results together. And he looked at me and he is like, I'm pretty sure we're saving the world right now. Like right now at this second.
Can you break down for those of us who don't really understand exactly what that means? What's an example in this particular case of the kind of renewable energy project you were working on?
Sure. So in this particular case, we were looking at a chain of stores in Mexico that wants to do a combination of solar power on their roof and maybe some battery storage so that they can put the solar energy where they need to. We could talk more about the dynamics of why you want battery storage with your solar power, but that's another podcast. Energy projects are still driven by the economics. Business owners, commercial entities, industrial entities, they want to save money. There are very, 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 very few people who are putting solar, wind, any kind of renewables up because they want to be greener. Everybody wants to be greener, but the way that projects get motivated is that they are going to save money.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we do is we show the economics of projects, like this much capital investment and then this much utility bill savings over the course of the project. And then if you need resiliency, like if the grid goes down, you stay up. What's the value of that to you and how we can incorporate that in the model? In this case, the economics looked really, really good. And we were like, oh my gosh, they are going to do this project. And this particular vendor has 2,000 sites across Mexico and Latin America. And it's like if they did solar at every single one of their stores, they could get to net zero or close to net zero. And it's like, this is how it happens. You can talk about the need for, an individual homeowner to put solar on their roof. And yeah, that's cool. Like every little bit helps, right? But to see an entire chain of stores doing a project like that, that's huge, and it's a huge number of kilowatt hours that are being offset from traditional generation sources and put onto renewables. The impact of that is huge. But the epic moment was my husband saying, I think we're saving the world right now. I'm the unbridled optimist and he's more of a realist. And to hear him have that pie in the sky outlook right at that moment, it's like my heart just grew 3 sizes, We are this is what it is all about, is real projects really happening. Yeah. One of my mentors likes to say that the only way anything ever changes in this world is by doing projects. So you can talk about how good renewables are until you're blue in the face, but nothing is ever going to change unless people do projects. Yeah, so that was a good epic moment there.
And what would be the definition of a project in that sense?
Actually installing hardware. There's a lot of...
something real.
Yeah, making it real. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of buzz out there. There's a lot of buzz in the media that, we're going to be 100% renewable by, whatever year. And in reality, renewables aren't that proliferated yet. There's still a lot about some of these technologies that is still in the infancy, still in this early stages where lots of innovation is still required. And so getting a project signed and in the ground is still a really, really big deal.
On behalf of the world, I want to thank you and your husband for your work. Honestly, so many of us, I think right now are feeling such angst and concern for so many things happening in the world, but absolutely about the health of our planet and whether there is even going to be a human species continuing on the planet right now. It's so alarming and just underneath the surface all the time. So I feel a little bit more hopeful just hearing you talk about this.
Well, I don't know the answer to those questions, but my thing is always, what can we do from right here? From right here, right now, what can we do to start making changes? There's never going to be one single day where every single gasoline and diesel powered vehicle gets ripped off the highway. I'm thinking of everyone going to heaven all at the same time. All of the gasoline cars just jump off the highway and they instantly get replaced with electric vehicles that are charged by renewables. There's not going to be a switch that someone flips but it's going to be these like incremental changes. And we have to solve the problems that come up incrementally of how do we accommodate all of that charging infrastructure if we're going to have electric vehicles? How does that actually work? And how does the economic driver for that work? You know, how do people pay for it? Who pays for it? What's the model? What's the path through this? Those are the problems that we're working on. So instead of like solving the whole world, what can we do from right here? Well, tomorrow we can put in a few more solar panels and a few more wind turbines, and we'll go from there.
I want to switch gears now and ask you about the next guidepost, I, which stands for invested in ourselves. You know, on this question of your impact, I think that one of the ways in which you are impacting people right now is through your framework, which you have put into a book called Spiral. And I'm wondering if you could share the highlights of that framework and how that has become a pathway for you in terms of how you invest and care for your own growth and development.
Spiral is founded out of the idea that engineering and technology development, which is how I was trained, is very, very similar to business development. Like they're both development and it's just a different domain, but development is the same. Design is the same across domains. And then once I made that leap of engineering development looks a whole lot like business development, just like in a different domain, it wasn't a very far leap to say like, oh, you know, personal development is a design and development exercise too. And you go through the same steps in each of these domains and you go through this same process. And so we could learn lessons across domains. And so I started to bring the engineering design process over into helping my coaching clients build their own businesses and using that design framework to do so. And then also kind of as a coach and in my own personal development, I noticed how it applied there as well. And I was like, oh, wow. So we can take lessons not only from engineering and bring it over into business development and personal development, but then I found also that it worked in the opposite direction, that you could actually bring lessons from personal development and spiritual growth and, you know, emotional health and bring them into business development and even technical development to enhance the process. And that's like one of my greatest gifts. That's how my brain works, is to see connections across seemingly unrelated domains. That's what Spiral is. Basically, in engineering, well, in all of these domains, whether it's engineering, business development, or personal development, there's a tendency to want a step-by-step solution, a linear solution, where you say like, oh, I'm just going to do step A, B, C, D, and then boom, I'll have what I want, whether that's a fully developed technical system or a business that's successful, or, you know, maybe it's you feeling calmer, or maybe it's you healthier. Like you just want this step-by-step process. But what we learned in engineering and also goes across all these domains is that the linear approach, first of all, sometimes just straight up doesn't work. And then you're back to the drawing board and you have to do it again. Sometimes you can push it through by brute force, but it's exhausting and it's painful. And in the engineering and business worlds, it's expensive. There's actually a lot of risk in doing it that way for like catastrophic failure, because basically you're putting all your eggs in one basket. Like if step B fails, you're toast. Or heaven forbid, if step D fails, like if you made it A, B, C, and now you're on step D and step D fails, you know, catastrophic failure. In engineering, engineers started to say, oh, what if we did this, assuming that we're only going to do this 4-step process once? Like, what if we expect, anticipate, and even plan to do it again, like cyclically or iteratively? And they called it spiral development. It goes by many names in engineering: spiral development, iterative development. It's a foundation of agile to do things iteratively. So, you know, you'll see it in different forms. But once I started to be a business owner myself, I was like, well, gosh, we just do the same thing. That instead of saying I'm going to build part A, then part B, then part C, then part D, and then I'll have my business full up. What if I did these little iterations and allowed it to have a little less pressure, allowed it to be a little bit more experimental, allowed myself periodic reviews so that I could, evaluate where I am, where I'm going, if my vision has changed. Because of course, I learned that my vision could change. Even as I was writing the book, I started out writing the book like specifically for entrepreneurs and like, this is how engineering design process applies to business development. But as I was writing the book, there was so much personal development aspect in it. There was so much of soul searching and the spiritual growth that I went through on this process that I had to incorporate that as well. And so the phases of the spiral, really briefly, these are my names for it. Like there's definite analogs in like engineering development and there's definite analogs in spiritual growth. But here's what I named it in the book Spiral. The phase 1 is inspiration. And that's where ideas flow and you're receiving downloads and you're just, the world is full of possibility. That's inspiration. The second phase is implementation. And that's where you shift from what you could do in inspiration into how you're going to do it. That is in implementation. So you're making the plans, you're gathering materials. If you're something to build, you're building it, you're kind of putting it together in preparation for the third phase, which is investigation, which is like a testing phase, like putting it out there. So if it's a business or a product, it's like putting it out there in front of people who are going to use it. If it's in your personal life, it's saying, okay, we're going to try this out. I'm going to see if my kids dig going to a different playground every other day over the summer. Like, let's try it. And maybe they'll think it's a total flop, in which case we'll try something different on the next spiral. Or maybe they'll think it's awesome and we'll add roller skating rinks as our next go around, But that process, the process of how did it go, asking the question of how did it go, is the fourth and final phase of the spiral, which is introspection. And introspection kind of has two pieces to it. The first is a rest. It's like taking a break, taking a step back into the big picture and saying, okay, I just did this great big thing. Like, where was I again? What was the overarching vision? The second part of introspection is the evaluation piece where you say like, okay, how did that go for us? Is that something we want to continue with? Did our vision change or is it the same? And if it's the same, is what we just did in line with that vision really? And do we want to continue? And so like that's this process of trying something new. And I call it a catalyst for innovation and expansion. And that's really all innovation is trying something new, a new way of doing things, a new way of solving problems. That's kind of the idea. The thing that doesn't often get talked about in Spiral is that it's also about how you string the spirals together. So you do those 4 phases and you expect to do them over and over and over and iterate. But then as you string them together, it moves you forward in knowledge. And at the beginning, you're in this phase of mystery where you don't really know what you don't know. And you're moving forward in knowledge. It's important not only, you asked me, how does this relate to investing in myself? Mm-hmm. And really, I find that the most powerful pieces of the spiral process are the most overlooked. And those are usually the introspection phase of each spiral, which is the rest phase and the evaluation phase. And then it's the mystery stage of development where, because we as a culture, we are so obsessed with action that we like just rush right through the introspection part. We're like, is this in line with my vision? Yes. Okay, next. Do the next thing. And then we also are obsessed with knowing for sure. But we forget that it's in mystery is where all the new ideas happen, all the innovation happens, all the magic happens in mystery. If you rush out of mystery and say, I just want to get to a final solution where I know what's going on, you miss the opportunity to create something new. That's where I'm at right now, is in a big way, sort of in the macro way in my life, being okay with being in mystery and trying not to rush through that. And it really does go back to my mom manifesto is stay curious. It goes back to that sense of curiosity. How can I get curious about where I'm at right now instead of rushing into a solution? How can I enjoy this exploration part? And then same for introspection is, why don't I just take a step back and ask myself the question? Because I know that a time is coming, and it's probably next week, when I'm going to be slammed with work and I'm just getting the stuff done and I'm just executing. And that's all implementation and investigation energy. That's what that is. I'm going to naturally come back to that. Right now, while it's quiet, can I give myself the grace of empty space?
Well, first, as you were just talking about, the mystery, all the magic happens there in that investigation. I'm thinking about the conversation I just had with Jonathan Fields of the Good Life Project, which I know you listened to as well, about our desire to want to install everything.
Oh, yes. That was so powerful.
Such a powerful metaphor. And I just feel like the threads of that are absolutely in what you were just sharing now. We're going to move to the last guidepost. But before we do that, I'm really honoring how you're in this place of pause right now. And thank you so much for that description of the spiral process. That was geniusly, succinctly expressed. What would you say is one tangible practice that you're using right now in the place of pause that maybe some of us could experiment with to give ourselves more breathing room in this phase that we typically want to rush through?
I mean, the one that comes immediately to mind is just putting down my phone. I say that because, yes, I love social media as much as the next person, but it's not just about that. As an entrepreneur who lives this crazy life that I live, I do a lot of multitasking. So, I'm at the park with the kids and I'm going to answer a work email on my phone. But I do find that my default is I get a task done. Say I load the dishwasher and then I'm like, got to check my phone.
Right.
Got to check my phone. I tell myself it's for a very good reason. Like I could have a work email sitting there that a client needs attention, But in reality, again, to go back to that theme of, I love to preach the theme of innovation, that everyone is an innovator, no matter what your field or what your day-to-day is like. As a human, you are an innovator. And innovation doesn't come out of activity. Innovation comes in the empty spaces. Like you don't get those big ideas because your brain, it's just like, it physically, like you exercise and you tear muscle and you cause stress. And then it's when you rest that your body is able to build the new muscle and to improve the heart function and all of that stuff. It's in the rest when the building happens. It's similar with innovation that your brain literally cannot put together creative ideas when you're rushing from thing to thing and always checking your phone for the next work email. For me, it's not just as simple necessarily as putting down my phone. I like to put that around some activity like hiking in nature, or I'm really a big fan right now of the Epsom salt float tanks. That's like,
what
have you been to a float spa?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so they run you a bath. It's in a big like bubbly. Think of a bathtub with a lid on it, but it's a nice big lid. So you have
it's like claustrophobic.
You don't at all because it's really big. It's really big, but it's small enough to keep the warm air in so you don't get cold. And they put like 100 pounds of Epsom salt in it, and you float. The person who first described it to me said it was sensory deprivation, and it's not really total sensory deprivation, but it is like you can hear the sound of your own heartbeat.
Oh my goodness.
And you're floating, so no contact points, and you can't bring your phone in there. And so, you're in there for an hour, like in the dark, listening to your own heartbeat. And sometimes they like to say, whatever happens in the tank, that is what was supposed to happen in there. So like sometimes I nap. I literally fall asleep. The music comes on to tell you to wake up. And I'm like, oh gosh, that felt like 3 minutes because I just fell asleep. Other times I sit there the whole time with my brain going over work stuff and like things I need to do and things I need to think about. But like, I always walk out of that with, I feel focused and grounded and I know exactly what I have to do next. And I gave myself the empty space to make a plan. And so I think that's where I'm at right now is putting down the phone, even if it means having to put yourself in a tank of water to do it.
What are the extreme measures we have to go to make that happen? Yeah. Wow. That's resonating big time for me. Well, we're going to move to the last guidepost, C. It stands for connected to a strong support network. What are the ways in which you are building relationships and community in your life?
So we just talked about putting our phones down.
Yeah.
I mean, my most powerful networks right now are online. I bristle a little every time someone says, oh, Facebook relationships aren't real relationships, or you don't know what's really going on. And I'm like, that might be true to a certain extent, but I'm in a group of moms. We formed together out of a forum when we were all trying to conceive our first babies. And so we are about 8 years old right now. My oldest is 8. So I guess maybe we're 9 years old at this point. We moved over to a Facebook group, and it's a group of 12, and we are all over the US, and we have 2 international people. They are literally the people, when I am sobbing uncontrollably, I tell them. When I'm on the other side of the world and my kid spikes a fever, I message them because I know someone is awake. Yeah, I'm like, who is awake right now and who can tell me? Do I take him to the ER or not? They are the people, and our group together has been through infertility. We've been through IVF as a group. We've been through divorce. We've been through abuse. We've been through career changes. We've been through adoptions. We've been through cross-country moves. We've been through moves from China to Europe. We've been through it together as a community. And then whenever we're in each other's cities, we get together. It's a priority. Like if we're in each other's cities, like we meet in person. That has been a really powerful thing for me to have that place, just a space where I can say anything. And I'm sure you can relate to this, Julie, as a person who serves as a mentor and as a person who serves to hold emotional space for other people. Having a group where you can like go and fall apart is pretty critical. Or having a place, not necessarily, just somewhere in your life where like you're not the advisor, you're not the guru, you're not the mentor, you're just you and you're just human and you're just falling apart right now. So that's been pretty powerful. Yeah, it's also been, I think, in real life, for real life relationships, just because of our wacky schedules and stuff like that, it's been interesting to see those kinds of friends who you can meet up with after months and months and months, and you just pick up right where you left off.
Yeah, special relationships. Those are. I could seriously talk to you all afternoon. I really could, but I know we should move on. So we're almost at the end, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to give me and anyone else who wants to a challenge. But before we do that, because I love your book so much, I was hoping we could shine a little more light on Spiral with 2 things. One, I wanted to ask if you would be willing to read a page that I was sort of cheering about when I read it. And then I wanted to ask if there is a page that is really meaningful to you that you might share with us.
Sure.
Are you up for that?
I'm up for that.
Okay. So the first page that I wanted you to read, it's on 232 of your book. It's maybe like the second sentence at the top of the page where you talk about how, starts with at the beginning of this book, we talked about the balance myth. So this alternative vision you have for not holding balance as the thing we should aspire to, but integration instead. I would love to hear that in your voice.
I want to preface this by saying that at the beginning of this chapter, because I'm going to read through to the end of the page because I like that. At the beginning of this chapter, and I was like, of course you picked this, Julie, I think you're in the Bay Area, is that right?
I am.
And so at the beginning of this chapter, I talk about how the Golden Gate Bridge sits on the boundary between the Pacific Ocean meets the Bay, the San Francisco Bay, and that forms this amazing and very unique climate and ecosystem of plants and animals that doesn't really exist anywhere else. So later in this passage, I'm going to talk about the place where the ocean meets the bay, and that's what it's referring to. At the beginning of this book, we talked about the balance myth, how a static state of balance isn't realistic or healthy. I suggest to you now that integration is the alternative. Instead of balance, look for integration. The integration of structure and flow, the integration of masculine and feminine, the integration of action and rest, the integration of introversion and extroversion, the integration of any 2 concepts that seem to oppose each other. These integrations are edges. The edge is the place where you're still able to see that there are two separate conditions, but they start to blend and intertwine. When things start to blend and intertwine, you really have a dance. You have a potent cocktail that's powerful enough to birth new creative endeavors into the world. I'm challenging you. The next time you go looking for balance, even if it feels like something that's healthy, could you look for integration instead? Could you look at the edge and appreciate the coming together of two seemingly disjointed, separate, and even opposite things? Could you appreciate the gifts that each phase brings? Could you examine that edge more closely and look for the magic? Because that edge, that boundary, that place of integration is where it happens. There's no true wall there. There's no true wall between the ocean and the bay. There's no true wall between the masculine and the feminine, or the introvert and the extrovert, or the structure and the flow. There's no wall. There's nothing that prevents us from crossing over. That's part of the magic. In each of these dichotomies, we remain separate, but also joined. The resulting diversity of thought, capability, and opportunity is the manifestation of the magic at the edges.
It's so good. And I can tell, you told me before we pressed record that you've been recording your audiobook. You've got your audiobook voice down.
Yeah.
So good.
I will add that I'm also reading Harry Potter with my kid, and I do all the voices. So I am totally down with performing books right now.
So good. I listen to my podcast episodes, and there's always a place where there's some kind of insight or truth bomb or moment that I know I want to go back to again. And I'm going to come back to this and listen to you share the insights in this page. And I actually feel like that's so powerful that even though I'm very curious about what else you might want to share, I think, would you be willing to do a live in the Mother's Quest Facebook group with another reading that's your favorite?
Absolutely.
And we will encourage people, if their curiosity is piqued, to go and find out the answer there. It's a little bit of a cliffhanger, what your favorite page is.
Excellent.
So
now I have to remember what my favorite page is.
So, Amy, what challenge would you like to give me and anyone listening who wants to say yes?
We talked about being okay with mystery, being okay with the unknown instead of rushing into a solution or rushing into a phase of action about it, and just being willing to sit with it. And I think we don't even realize we're doing that a lot of times. And so I guess my question for you is, can you identify a place where you've got a mystery in your life? It could be in parenting, it could be in career, it could be in personal development, whatever. Can you identify a place where you might be rushing toward a solution? And if you can you commit to stepping back, putting your phone down and, just spending some time sitting with that, considering it? It could take the form of a brainstorm. It could just be a simple kind of, meditation on the subject of that mystery in your life. Did that make sense?
It does. Inviting more space and exploration and mystery for something that we are trying to find a solution to, and allowing ourselves to just not rush the decision, but stay in the pause and explore it more.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that is in my life yet, but I will think about it and make sure I'm consciously staying in that space. And I'm also feeling really drawn. I'm sure there must be one of these Epsom salt float places near me. I think I want to go and have that experience. So maybe I will go into that experience with some intent of sitting in the mystery of whatever this question is.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you should, and try it out and let me know how it goes. I'm sure you have one around you. But then you could set that intention, but also just remember that whatever happens in there was supposed to happen in there. And it's very important, I think, to not judge it. If you need to be still, you'll be still. If you need to wiggle a lot, sometimes I wiggle a lot. I flex my feet and I wiggle my fingers and I'm like, why can't I settle down? And it's like, but maybe I needed to wiggle that day. Maybe that's what my body needed to do. And so, whatever happens in there is what's supposed to happen, and let it serve you no matter what.
Okay, I appreciate that. We've arrived at the end, but I have a feeling I'll have you on again someday, because I just feel like we're barely scratching the surface of all there is to reflect on together. I've so enjoyed this time. This is where we get to acknowledge any insights or takeaways that we each have from our conversation. I think for me, you started with saying that your mom is a creative genius, but I think I'm just really appreciating the creative genius that's in you. It's funny, it's making me feel a little bit teary. I think it's because maybe you don't see that in yourself as much, that you think I know you've welcomed in other parts of who you are, but you think that you're still maybe like at your core an engineer. But I think for the life that you have designed for yourself and what you bring to your children in terms of their learning and exploration and the concepts that you've created in your book, there's so much, yes, analysis and insight, but so much creativity and so much spirit. And I just love how it all comes together in ways that I feel really blessed by. And this word ecosystem, when you talked about the coming together of the ocean and the bay, there's something about just paying attention to the ecosystem in our lives, in our businesses, in the world around us that this conversation is shining a light on for me. So thank you for all of that.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's amazing. Again, to bring it full circle, to be seen. And you're right. I think I say in Spiral, like right in the first chapter, I do struggle with the idea that I am a creative, because my creativity is sort of not traditional in the traditional type of creativity. And even my job title, when I do innovation facilitation for entrepreneurs, and I call myself the innovation catalyst, that like, I'm not the one who does the innovation, but I'm the one who catalyzes it for others. And I love that role. And so to be seen as the creative, to be seen as the innovator, it is special. And I think it's something that I need to give myself that acknowledgement. So I really appreciate you saying that and seeing that. And yes, you've learned that about me, that sometimes I just need someone else to say it, and then maybe I can wield it. So thank you for that. What you just said about ecosystem, I think is actually a huge takeaway for me, that I hadn't really thought about it in that way, even though I wrote that passage in the book. And I think I said the word ecosystem, but like, I do talk about edges and the integration at the edges a lot. And that has been part of the foundation of this spiral concept. But to talk then about how that integration creates a unique ecosystem, and that unique ecosystem is like the fabric of your life. That's like the next layer of it. And then what does that ecosystem look like? So you've just sparked a whole new set of ideas.
Maybe it's part 2.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you, Amy. I know you're off on your next adventure, but we still get a few more weeks of you in the Mother's Quest Facebook group as our ambassador. And all of those lives and everything will still be there. So anyone who's listening at any time can come and be part of that experience and hear the insight and the invitations that you've been giving us. So I look forward to our next 2 weeks with you there. And I hope you have an amazing summer of pause.
Thank you. You as well.
So much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.